Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum students. Today we are going to start our third unit, that is reproduction in living organisms. So reproduction. Reproduction is a process in which one individual produces new individual, or we can say parents give birth to their young ones, or the process of multiplication, generation of new offsprings takes place. So we are studying reproduction in plants as yet. So the main process of reproduction is carried out in plants in different ways. First of all, I want to discuss the process of pollination in plants with you. So, pollination is basically the transfer of grains known as pollen grains that are formed on the male part of a flower, and that is basically known as the anther, the male part, and the female part of a flower, that is known as the stigma. So, from the anther to the stigma, the transfer of pollen grains, this transferation of the pollens is known as pollination. I want to discuss with you some parts of a flower that includes the petals, the stamen on the left side. Stamen consists of two parts. One is anther and the other is filament. You can see two stalks on two sides of the pistil. It is a thin tube known as the filament, and the upper, the butterfly look part is known as the anther. The filament and the anther in together are known as stamens. So basically the anther is the male reproductive part from where the pollen grains flow through heavy wind, through different through butterfly, through honeybees, and etc., and are transferred onto the pistil. The pistil is the center swollen part of the flower, that is a yellow bottle shaped part. The pistil is further divided into three sections. The top one is the stigma, the center stalk like part is the style, and the bottom vase type of a bulb is known as the ovary, where the ovary lies. This is the female reproductive organ of a flower. So the pollen grains, when fallen on the stigma, this process is known as pollination. We can also see the petals, the pink colored petals, the green color small leaves at the bottom, sepals, and the stalk or the stem known as the pedicule of a flower. So here we discuss the process of pollination. The pollination is basically of two types. There are two kinds of pollination known as self-pollination and cross-pollination. Self-pollination. Self-pollination takes place within one flower or within one plant. A plant of rose having 2 to 3 roses on it. The pollination from the anther of one flower to the stigma of another flower of the same plant is known as self-pollination. That pollination may take place in the same flower or another flower of the same plant. Whereas cross-pollination is a pollination that takes place in between two different flowers of two different plants. I would like to elaborate it more clearly with the help of this diagram. A honeybee used using the transfer a honeybee in the process of pollination of the same plant but of the same flower in the same plant is known as self pollination. Similarly, a honeybee transferring pollen grains from a flower to another flower of the same plant is also known as self pollination. Whereas in the second picture on the right side, you can see the honeybee moving from plant A to plant B and transferring pollen grains from the flower of plant A to the flower of plant B is known as cross pollination. Basically, the pollen grains attach themselves to the bottom of the honeybees, and therefore the transfer of pollen grains takes place. So these are the two types of pollinations which I tried my best to elaborate to you with a clearer picture. So in reproduction, there are many types of reproduction in plants. One was pollination. Second of them is known as binary fission. So binary fission in organisms or in any animal body takes place when a single cell or a single organism is divided into two, having the same shape, same structure, and it basically divides into two and develop its identical copy. This process is known as binary fission. You can see in this picture a cell, a single cell on the left side having a blue ring, that is the DNA of that cell. The DNA and the cell itself. The first step, the DNA replicates. The DNA in the same cell becomes double when we have like a condition of having identical twins. Then in the second stage after the replication of DNA, where you can see a cleavage in between, this cytokinesis takes place. Cytokinesis is basically the breakdown of the membrane, and that the membrane is being divided into two parts. Here you can see in the number 3 cell picture, in which a cleavage is arising, a cell is dividing into two parts. And on the fourth picture, you can see that two cells of identical shape and size are developed. So the division of a single cell, its replication, its cytokinesis means division, and then its development into identical twins is known as the process of binary fission. This is also a method of reproduction. Asexual reproduction. Well, the examples of asexual reproduction may include Paramecium and amoeba. This is the diagram of a paramecium, the structure of paramecium. It divides and reproduces itself through binary fission. It is a unicellular organism having a cilia, hair-like structures at its outer side. It has an endoplasm, that is the inner membrane, ectoplasm, that is the outer membrane. It has contractile vacuoles, it has food vacuoles, it has a groove inside it and a gillet, and it has trichocyst in it. and it is green, in light greenish in color. This is the and a unicellular organism. This is a diagram of amoeba. This is another example of a binary fission structure who develops or reproduces through binary fission. This is a jelly-like substance having food vacuole, cell membrane, ectoplasm, endoplasm, mitochondria, nucleus, micronucleus, and macronucleus, etc. Now, moving on to another process known as seed germination. It is another method of reproduction. And in this process, when you soak a seed in water, it develops itself and it grows into root, and it germinates into a top and a root and shoot type of part. The upper part is known as the radicle, and another which generates from the bottom is known as the plumule. So here you can see, I wanted to show you the internal structure of a seed of a plant. The green part is the plumule, and the part that generates from the center towards the base is known as the radicle, light green one. And the altogether plumule, radicle, and the cotyledon inside is known as the embryo. And it has a seed coat over it. This is how it actually takes place. The upper part and the lower part grows, and this is how germination takes place in soil. A simple seed develops into a radicule and a plumule, and then it further divides into a plant. These are the steps which you can see from left to right. So this is another method of reproduction or growth of a plant. Now the process of fragmentation. It is another process, and it is also an asexual mode of reproduction known as fragmentation. In this, each fragment of an organism, when cut down or divided or broken down, develops into an individual structure in itself. It can regrow from its every broken part, and one of its example is Spirogyra. Here is the microscopic view of a Spirogyra. It is a green algae basically. And here I would like to show you, if a Spirogyra is cut down into two parts, it has chloroplast inside it, it has nucleus in its every cell, and if a Spirogyra is cut down, it can regenerate and give birth to another individual. This is a fragment of Spirogyra. So this is another process of reproduction or growth. So in our next lecture we will go for our next topic, but as yet you have to learn the multiple choice questions and the short question answers of this unit. I hope you are learning your old work as well. So you have to learn all of these and write your short question and answers for practice. Thank you guys.